Museveni has panicked after a statement was issued by the US concerning the disputed election in Uganda. Welcome to Kenya Lens Media, where we give you news updates the way they break. And if you are new here, kindly consider subscribing as a way of supporting us grow this platform. Now, the United States government has issued a firm warning to Uganda's authorities, expressing deep concern of alleged voter intimidation, restricted media access, and violence surrounding the East African nation's highly contested 2026 presidential election. This statement follows reports of heavy security deployment, internet and communication shutdown, and opposition claims that the electoral process lacked transparency and fairness, factor that critics say undermine democratic standards and could fuel instability. In security advisories and public statements, the U.S. Embassy in Kampala and the U.S. Department of State urged Ugandan authorities to uphold democratic norms by ensuring election credibility, protecting civil liberties, and allowing open media coverage. The embassy warned American citizens in Uganda to exercise caution amid post-election tensions, citing incidents of tear gas use and reported shooting during demonstrations following provisional results. The U.S. emphasized that intimidation, suppression of voters undermines public trust, and stressed that the respect for human rights, freedom of press, and the rule of law are essential for any credible election. Officials highlighted the importance of transparent vote counting procedures to maintain confidence in the outcome. Uganda's presidential election was held on January 15, 2026, amid high stakes and mounting domestic and international scrutiny. The Electoral Commission announced that President Yoweri Museveni, in power since 1986, secured another term with a roughly 71-72% of the vote, and his main challenger, opposition leader Robert Kyagulanyi, known as Bobi Wine, rejected the results as fake and accused the government of widespread irregularities, including ballot stuffing and harassment of electoral agents. The election unfolded under internet shutdown imposed by Uganda Communications Commission 2 days before polling day. The blackout blocked most online services, social media, and messaging platforms, with authorities saying this was unnecessary or that this was necessary to curb misinformation and maintain order. Human rights groups have condemned this as a direct blow to transparency and free communication during the critical democratic processes. Security forces were visibly deployed in major cities and opposition strongholds, contributing to an atmosphere of fear. Clashes between security officials and citizens were reported, including deaths and arrests. Although exact figures remain contested, the U.S. Embassy advisory reflected concern that such unrest could escalate without proper safeguards. Bobi Wine and the National Unity Platform have described the electoral environment as repressive, and Bobi Wine's camp reported that he escaped a raid on his home and that his family remained under de facto house arrest as voters were being counted. While police denied detaining him, they acknowledged a heavy security presence near his residence, a region where supporters feared state pressure could suppress peaceful dissent. Beyond Bobi Wine's experience, Knight's organization documents that broader opposition hardships. Amnesty International reported incidents of excessive force at campaign rallies, including the use of tear gas, batons, and pepper spray against peaceful crowds, arbitrary arrests of suspected opposition supporters, movement restrictions, and roadblocks were also verified, with security officials sometimes deploying military vehicles to obstruct campaign activities. The UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights echoed some concerns, warning the arbitrary detentions, disappearances of activists, and also violent dispersals marked a troubling pre-election climate. Such actions, the UN said, risk infringing fundamental rights and casting doubt on the legitimacy of the electoral process. Attempts to monitor and report on the election were further complicated by media restrictions and NGO bans. Days before the vote, the Ugandan government ordered local rights organizations, including Chapter 4 Uganda and Human Rights Network for Journalists Uganda, to halt operations, citing national security concerns. These groups have historically documented elections and human rights abuses, and their suspension limited independent verification of events on the ground. Journalists face barriers ranging from intimidation to constrained movement as calls increased from press freedom advocates for authorities to ensure safe and unfettered coverage before, during, and after election day. Uganda's elections have long drawn scrutiny from international observers. Freedom House 2025 report described the nation's electoral credibility as declining, noting that elections occur regularly but lack genuine competitiveness and institutional independence. In the year 2021 election, international actors, including the United States and the European Union, voiced concerns over irregularities, harassment of opposition figures, and media suppression, urging authorities to investigate reported abuses. This pattern of international critique reflects persistent governance and human rights challenges in Uganda. President Museveni's extended rule has seen constitutional changes that removed age and term limits and reinforcing his long dominance over the political landscape while narrowing the space of effective opposition. Critics have argued that these legal and practical shifts weaken democratic accountability and reduce the electoral competitiveness. Uganda's election has implications beyond its borders. The country plays a significant role in East African security and stability, contributing troops to regional peacekeeping missions, especially in Somalia, and serving a key partner to Western governments in counter-terrorism and development initiatives. However, sustained democratic backsliding, including limits on civil liberties and electoral fairness, could strain these partnerships and affect regional dynamics. Moreover, Uganda's youthful population, with a large share under the age of 30, brings added pressure for political change and economic opportunity. When democratic processes are perceived as closed or unfair, frustrations among young voters can fuel protests or political disengagement, both of which have been observable during this election cycle. The U.S. warning over Uganda's contested elections spotlights a broader challenge facing emerging democracies, balancing national governance with the respect for human rights and electoral integrity. When elections are marred with intimidation, restricted misinformation, and allegation of violent repression, the legitimacy of leadership is questioned. Not just domestically, but global partners and investors. For Ugandans, the stakes include confidence in political institutions and whether future leaders will respect civil liberties. For regional neighbors, a fragile political environment in Uganda could contribute to cross-border tensions or set precedents for how elections are conducted in East Africa. For international allies like the United States, the ability to advocate effectively for democratic norms may influence foreign policy, engagement, and aid partnerships. In sum, the U.S. warning following Uganda's disputed polls underscores not only immediate concerns over one election, but deeper questions about governance, rights, and the resilience of democratic processes in a nation at a political crossroads. That is all for today from Kenya Lens Media, where we give you news updates the way they break. Kindly, if you're new here, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel.